My name is Marianne Meyer, and I have been a renal dietitian for over 35 years and have worked with people with kidney disease at all stages of their kidney disease. I'd like to preface today's talk by why I feel the diet is important for people with kidney disease. Your diet is just as important as the medications you take for any illness that you might have. You've all heard the saying, "You are what you eat." And that is true because all the food that we eat contains vitamins and minerals, and those things are kept in our body in the amounts that we need. What we don't need, sometimes we literally flush down the toilet. So your kidneys are responsible for helping us keep what we need and getting rid of what we don't. So diet is extremely important simply because of the functions of the kidney. I am a renal dietitian, and with that title, it just simply means I work with patients that have kidney disease. I have a certification in renal nutrition, and I have worked with patients from pre-dialysis all the way to transplant throughout my career. So we will teach you how to personalize your diet, and I can't stress that I just can't stress that, as important as it is. It will be very individualized to what you need and not to what everyone needs. You can't just tell people to limit your phosphorus because they won't know what that means. Every diet is individualized to each patient's needs. We might develop meal plans if that's something that you need to help you follow your diet. We review lab. I sometimes tell patients I cannot work without lab results because that tells me how you're doing with your diet. I look at the lab, I discuss it with you, and if there's something that needs tweaking, we work on that. And then there's other parts of the diet, such as managing fluid, which we can help you with as well. People with kidney disease need to limit their fluid to some degree, some more than others, but this is something that a renal dietitian can help you with. If you don't have access to a renal dietitian, what do you do? Your doctor can refer you to a dietitian in a hospital or possibly a diabetic specialist if you are a diabetic. Sometimes just making some minor adjustments to what you're already doing can help you with your kidney disease. There are specialists in the hospital who are dietitians and can bill your insurance, bill your Medicare, and they can help you with your diet for kidney disease. If you happen to need dialysis in the future or you have a transplant, you will have a dietitian available to you during your treatment or after your transplant. So why is diet such an important part of the treatment? As I mentioned earlier, there are things in our diet that we eat that are broken down as we digest and absorb those foods. As we eat, the food enters our stomach. It then is broken down and it goes further into the intestines where it's absorbed. What we don't need, we excrete either through the intestinal tract or through our kidneys. By following your diet, you can keep kidney function longer. You won't need dialysis for a certain amount of time. It may keep the time you need from the time you have kidney disease until you need dialysis a lot longer. It can prevent symptoms. When kidneys fail, you have symptoms such as a bad taste in your mouth. You might be having trouble sleeping. You might have nausea. You might have some vomiting. By watching your diet, you can keep these symptoms at bay. You can prevent complications. You can control your blood sugar better. You can control your blood pressure and your weight by keeping your diet under control. And it will also help balance the nutrients that you need. So what's important in the diet? We have calories and protein. Both are very important. Sodium and fluid go together. Potassium is another thing that we need to watch in our diet. Phosphorus is something that you may not have heard of because phosphorus is something that only people with kidney disease really need to limit in their diet. So you may have never heard of phosphorus before, and your friends may never have heard of phosphorus before. And then some vitamins and minerals become important also. So what should you know about calories? Calories are the energy that we need to live. I worked with a physician one time that told me, and I mention this to people all the time, your body's like a car. If your car doesn't have fuel, it will not run. Your body's the same way. If you don't have enough calories, your body simply cannot function the way it needs to function. So you need calories to fuel your body and to be healthy. Calories come from 4 different types of food. Carbohydrates and proteins provide the same amount of calories per serving. Fats and alcohols provide almost double the amount that carbohydrates and proteins provide. So therefore, you get much more calories from fat than you would from carbohydrates. Your weight is based on what you take in versus what you burn. In other words, calories in equals calories out. If we take too many calories in versus what we burn, we're going to gain weight. If you don't eat enough, but you continue to burn calories, you're going to lose weight. In other words, your body is going to turn to itself for nutrition and calories and energy, and you will lose weight and also muscle mass, and that's not what we want to happen. Some foods are designed for people who are on diets, and they might be labeled as sugar-free or fat-free. Be aware that those may contain some sugars, and you may still be getting some calories from those foods, even though they're not quite as healthy as they could be. So be careful and read labels if something is labeled sugar-free or fat-free. So what should you know, or what should we know about protein? Protein is what we need to build muscle and maintain our body tissues. There are 2 types of protein. We call them high biological value or low biological value. High biological value are the proteins that come from meats or animal sources. Eggs, chicken, beef, any type of dairy product. Anything that would come from an animal is considered a high biological protein. What this means is it has all the building blocks that are necessary to provide a complete protein. In other words, all you need to eat is the egg. It's a complete protein. Low biological, on the other hand, come from plants. Beans, nuts, peanut butter, dried peas, like black-eyed peas. Those are low biological because they don't have all the building blocks necessary to make it a complete protein. You need to combine it with something else to give it all the building blocks. For example, if you had peanut butter and you put it on a slice of whole grain bread, you would have a complete protein. The peanut butter would provide some building blocks, the whole grain bread would provide the other, therefore making it a complete protein. Vegetarians are very well versed in this, and they know how to put these foods together without any difficulty whatsoever. So why is protein important when kidneys are damaged? Protein from your meat sources contains, when you eat protein from, for example, if you have a steak, when you eat this steak and you digest and absorb it, it's broken down into nitrogen and urea. If you've ever had the blood test done, the BUN or the BUN, the UN stands for urea and nitrogen. These are the toxins that are produced by the protein that you eat when you have that steak. We can measure those in your blood, and if those levels are high, it can indicate your kidney function. So we monitor that BUN level to make sure you don't have high levels. Limiting your protein can help keep these levels down and will help stave off the symptoms such as the bad breath. You might have a better appetite. You might sleep better if you keep these levels down. And that's why watching your protein intake can be very important in kidney disease, especially in the early stages, stage 3 and stage 4. And it's not a big limitation because we don't want to decrease your protein intake to the point where you're becoming malnourished, but there is a fine line as to how much is too much and how much is not enough. That's where a dietitian can help you find the amount that's correct for you. So what are good sources of protein? Beef, pork, chicken, turkey, fish of all kinds, eggs and egg whites. And it's also known that vegetarians who eat only plant-based protein can combine these and still do quite well with their renal diet. Sodium, very important. So what should you know? Sodium is a mineral. It's a mineral that we call an electrolyte, which means it's very important for the function of some of our body functions. It's found mainly in table salt, but it's also found in many, many foods. Unfortunately, it's in a lot of foods that we all like. It controls fluid and can control blood pressure. So I think most of us, whether we have kidney disease or not, would be well advised to limit the sodium in our diet. Too much sodium can make us thirsty. And when we're thirsty, we want to drink. I don't know if you've ever had a pizza before you go to bed, but when you wake up in the morning, you have cotton mouth. And it's simply because all of the salt that you ate the night before is making you want to drink to get rid of that thirst. If you don't have good kidney function, you cannot excrete that fluid that you drink, and it has nowhere to go. So it will just continue to build up in your body, and it can cause swelling, it can cause edema in your ankles, and unfortunately, if it gets too bad, it can get to your lungs and cause some serious problems. If you're on dialysis and you drink too much fluid, that fluid will have to be removed during your treatment. The more fluid you have to remove during a dialysis treatment can cause some serious problems during your treatment, such as cramping, some nausea, your blood pressure can drop, and you could even pass out, which is scary not only for you and the staff, but for other patients around you as well. Sodium is very important in the management of your fluid. So how do you limit sodium in your diet? The first and easiest way is to throw away the salt shaker. Just get rid of it. Avoid adding salt to your foods. Just don't use salt. Limit processed foods. And that's very difficult today because almost everything that we eat is processed. I tell my patients if it's easy, if it's convenient, if it's quick, it's salty. If all you do is add water to it and pop it in the microwave for 5 minutes, it's salty. Read labels. Learn to read labels and you will see how much sodium is in a product. Limit cured foods. Ham, bacon, sausage. Save that for Sunday morning breakfast. Don't have it daily. If you use fats in cooking, such as butter and margarine, sometimes it's better to use oil. However, you can find unsalted butter at the store, and it can be used in place of regular butter. Some other seasonings that you can use, fresh onion and fresh garlic can really season your food. Some salt-free seasonings, such as Mrs. Dash, are very acceptable for people who have kidney disease or who are on dialysis. And there's very, very many different varieties of Mrs. Dash, and many folks have their favorites, and they can tell by the color of the lid. I think there's 8 to 10 different flavors, and someone says, I like the orange lid, I like the red lid, so they have their favorites. Fresh jalapenos can really add some zing to your food. Pepper's always acceptable. Herbs and spices and flavor extracts. And one of the examples I bring up is homemade tacos or burritos. If you make your homemade tacos with the packet of seasoning that you buy at the store, you're getting a very, very large amount of sodium in your diet. Instead, use chili powder, cumin powder or seed, garlic powder, and onion powder, and you get the same effect, you just don't get the salt. And they're very good. Too much fluid can be a direct result of your sodium intake, so this is a good way to transition into fluid. Sodium, as I said earlier, makes us thirsty. And when we're thirsty, we want to drink. So what is fluid? I count fluid as anything that is liquid at room temperature, whether it be Jell-O, soups, ice cream. If you left it on your kitchen counter and you came back in 30 minutes later and it has melted, you count it as fluid. Too much fluid when a person has limited kidney function can cause swelling. Weight can go up, and it's not body weight, it's fluid weight that you're seeing on the scale. It may make it uncomfortable to have your dialysis treatment. Many patients who have a lot of fluid to take off during a dialysis treatment have what they call a dialysis hangover. They don't feel well. The less fluid you have to take off during a treatment, the better you will feel after your treatment. Eventually, too much fluid will cause problems with your heart because your heart has to move all this fluid around. And if you continually have an extra 5 to 10 pounds of fluid on, your heart has to work very difficult, and this will cause some congestive heart failure later down the road. And that's something that none of us want to have. So how do I limit fluid? First of all, watch your salt intake. Number one, limit your sodium intake, and you won't be as thirsty and feel the desire to drink as often. Watch the size of your cups. Know how much your cups hold. I tell patients to know or to have a cup that they know how much it contains. For example, if you've been in the hospital, most of you have a cup from the hospital that has the straw and the lid. It tells you exactly how much fluid is in that cup, and it's 1 quart. 1 quart is approximately what is necessary for someone who is on hemodialysis. Maybe more or less, depending on whether or not someone has urine output. But that's the baseline fluid is 1 quart a day for a person on hemodialysis. That cup is perfect to measure your fluid. Drink only when you're thirsty, and if you're diabetic, control your blood sugar. If your blood sugars are high, you will be thirsty. Rinse and spray your mouth with just a mist of water. Go to the dollar store, get a spray bottle, put water in it, keep it in the refrigerator, maybe put a little lemon juice in it, and keep it cold. And when you're thirsty, just spritz your mouth with the cup, with the spray bottle. It will help keep you from getting thirsty, keep your mouth moist, and you won't get as much fluid. Take your medications at meals. Take it with food. That way you can keep your fluid for something when you're really thirsty. Use smaller cups. Brush your teeth for dry mouth. If you have a favorite mouthwash, keep it cold in the refrigerator. Anything cold quenches your thirst a lot better than something at room temperature. Freeze grapes, whether you like green or red, it doesn't matter. Freeze them. They're very, very cold. They quench your thirst, and they're better than ice cubes. Chew gum, although I think sugar-free gum is a better option because it's not sugary and it's not sticky. And stay active. By staying active, you won't think about drinking, and therefore you will drink less. Potassium. Potassium, like sodium, is an electrolyte. It has the function of making sure our nerves work well and our muscles contract appropriately. Too little or too much can cause problems and can make your muscles weak and can actually make your heart stop. Our heart is just a muscle. And if we have too much potassium or too little potassium, this can be very, very dangerous. Potassium can often be found on food labels, although not every label will have it on there. But sometime in 2018, I think the requirement is that it will be on the labels. What are some high potassium foods? I think we all think about bananas. Others are tomatoes, oranges, orange juice, potatoes. The one I caution people about is avocados. Avocados is the #1 food that has more potassium than any other, even bananas. So I usually tell people it's an A, not because it's at the beginning of the alphabet, but because it's got the highest amount of potassium of any fruit or vegetable that I've ever seen. So if you like Mexican food, avoid the guacamole. Salt substitutes. No salt, new salt, Morton's light salt, they have potassium. To limit the sodium, they remove the sodium and replace it with potassium. This is the only food item that I tell patients that they should not eat because of the potassium content. Dried fruits such as prunes or dates, banana chips, those all have a lot of potassium because they've been dehydrated and the potassium is much more concentrated. So watch those foods as well. So how do I know if my potassium's high or low? Know your lab values, number one. When you have your lab drawn, always check your potassium level. If it's too high or too low, you may experience weakness or you may have an irregular heartbeat. Some people have no symptoms at all and can suffer a cardiac arrest without any warning. So that is why potassium is so extremely important when kidneys fail. How do you control your potassium? Ask your dietitian for a list of foods that have potassium in them. Any dietitian that's in the dialysis unit will have access to these lists, and you can ask for one at any time. And follow your diet. Try to limit your intake of high potassium foods and stay with the ones that are lower or medium, and occasionally have a high potassium fruit or vegetable. But always check with your dietitian. If limiting potassium, there is a special way you can decrease the amount of potassium in potatoes. It's called leaching or dialyzing your potatoes. You can peel them, cut them into small pieces, soak them in water for 2 to 4 hours, discard that water, and then cook them in a fresh pot of water. By doing this, you remove a large amount of the potassium from your potatoes. Phosphorus. Probably the one topic I talk about more than anything. Phosphorus is extremely important. It's very, very important in maintaining good bone health. When kidneys are healthy, there's a fine balance between calcium and phosphorus that the kidneys will help you maintain. When kidneys are damaged or sick, this balance can be thrown off simply because of some of the functions of the kidneys that allow calcium to be absorbed and allow us to get rid of the extra phosphorus. If one is too high or too low, the balance is thrown off. So when calcium and phosphorus are out of balance, calcium comes out of the bone, can cause weak bones, making them very, very susceptible to breaking. And then the extra calcium can deposit in blood vessels, your heart, and can really impede the circulation to your fingers and your toes. This can cause some serious problems. So follow your diet and take your medications as prescribed. But the number one way to keep this process from happening is to keep your phosphorus controlled. I tell patients the phosphorus is like the first domino that falls. If the phosphorus is high, everything else will follow. Phosphorus is found in many foods, although fruits have very little or no phosphorus. 40 to 60% of the phosphorus that we eat from normal foods, such as our meat, our fruits, and our vegetables, is absorbed by the body. However, food companies like to add phosphorus to the foods that we eat. A lot of our processed foods, a lot of our meats that we buy at the store, a lot of canned convenience foods have additives that are put in the foods to make them taste better, have a longer shelf life, maintain color a little longer. So they make it more appealing for you to buy. However, these additives are absorbed at 100%. So every amount of phosphorus in that additive, in that food, is going to be absorbed by your body. So these foods are very dangerous to people who have kidney disease. So try not to use processed foods. Try not to use fast foods, because too much phosphorus, again, causes problems with the calcium and phosphorus balance. So what are some high phosphorus foods in our diet? Milk and dairy products, dried beans and peas, baking mixes such as Bisquick or quick pancake mixes, Bran cereals such as Raisin Bran, any type of bran or whole wheat cereal, nuts and peanut butter, almonds, your whole group of nuts, chocolate, that's a sad one for a lot of people, colas, Cokes and Pepsis. However, most dark colas are high in phosphorus, but root beer is one dark cola that can be used. Beer is another high phosphorus food, and some of the other drinks that have phosphorus additives in them. How do I know if my phosphorus is high? Again, check your lab value. Know what your numbers are. If it's high, talk with your dietitian and see if we can find ways to help you get it down. You will itch. I have heard from patients that this itch is like no other. It's a very severe itch, and you will scratch and scratch and scratch. Achy joints, bone fractures, some muscle weakness. And you might have some of these same symptoms if your phosphorus is too low. However, with kidney disease, it's rare to see a phosphorus that's too low unless someone has been very, very ill and hasn't eaten much for several weeks. It's more often high. High phosphorus is much more common. How do I control my phosphorus? Again, track your labs. Follow your phosphorus diet. Take your phosphate binders. Binders is a group of medications that help you keep your phosphorus under control. They absorb the phosphorus in the food when you eat it, but they must be taken with food. They only work in your stomach. So take your binders as directed by your physician and your dietitian. Limit some of your sodas, such as Coke and Pepsi, although the clear sodas, such as 7-Up and Sprite, are generally acceptable, and root beer, as I mentioned earlier. Phosphorus may or may not be listed on the food labels. It's not one that's required, but it might have phosphorus listed in the percentage of the USRDA. You can have your dietitian help you figure out if a food is high in phosphorus. Vitamins. Vitamins are important for good health because they provide a lot of benefits to all of us. You might be taking a multivitamin. During kidney disease, you may or may not need the vitamins that you're taking in your multivitamin. Your needs change, so make sure you ask your doctor which vitamin is best for you. When you start dialysis, sometimes the dialysis process itself will remove some of the vitamins from your blood, particularly the water-soluble vitamins or the B vitamins. Those are ones that can be dialyzed off. B1, B2, B3, folic acid, pyridoxine. I'm sure you've read these on the labels of your vitamins. Those are specifically designed to help the energy process in our body, but they can be dialyzed off. There are some vitamins that are designed specifically for dialysis patients. We call those designer vitamins. They are specifically for people with kidney disease or people with kidney failure. Most of them contain the B vitamins, folic acid, and a few other things that you might need that are dialyzed off. So take what your doctor prescribes and try not to take anything else unless you ask your doctor if it's okay. Food labels are very important. Most of them will tell you how much sodium, how much potassium, maybe phosphorus, but also protein and your sugars. And those are the important things to look at on a label. If you're having difficulty with a label, bring it in, have your dietitian go over it with you, and she can help you she can tell you if that food is better, or she can tell you if that food is okay for you to eat or not. A label can also make you be more aware of the ingredients that are in a food. If you look at the list of labels, it's like going to a chemistry class. You might find all these different chemical additives in your food. Look for potassium, look for phosphorus or PHOS or sodium. That will tell you whether that food has phosphate additives, has sodium additives, or has potassium additives. And again, your dietitian can let you know if it's okay for you to use or not. Always bring the labels in. Ask for help anytime. There are websites available for you to choose. Again, your dietitian is aware of these, and if you're computer savvy, you can look some of these foods up on your own. Heart healthy, I think it's good for everyone to eat a heart healthy diet, not just people that have kidney disease. Fruits and vegetables, but make sure you look at the list of high potassium fruits and vegetables. Skinless poultry, fish, those are all good for you, especially the oily ones that have the omega-3 fatty acids. Limit red meat. Choose the loins, trim the fat as always. Don't use fried foods very often. Processed grains. Try not to use white rice. It can cause your blood sugars to go up a little bit more. But these are all heart-healthy choices for you. You can grill, you can roast, you can broil. Limit the sodium, the saturated fats. And again, as I mentioned earlier, watch the low-fat labels. Sometimes they're not really low-fat. And limit your portions. Try not to eat the 16-ounce porterhouse steak. Again, talk with your doctor or dietitian before you take any extra vitamins, or if you see something in the paper that's a miracle cure, ask your doctor, because sometimes those have ingredients that are probably not safe for you to use. The star fruit, since we're talking about food, star fruit has something in it, and I'm not quite sure, that is poisonous to people on dialysis or with kidney disease. So try not to use star fruit. It's a beautiful fruit in salads, but it can be very dangerous if you use it and you have kidney disease. So again, ask your doctor or your dietitian. So what can you eat? Oh, there's lots of things. You can eat anything fresh. Frozen meats, frozen vegetables, fresh vegetables, cream cheese, sour cream you can use. There's a whole list, and I know sometimes it's very difficult when you see the things that are on the high phosphorus list and the high sodium list and the high potassium list that you're discouraged, that there's nothing left for you to eat. But ask your dietitian. There's many, many things you can eat. There's ways you can prepare foods that are healthy for you and your family, not just you. There are many, many choices, many fruits, many vegetables, many meats that you can use. So please, just ask. I personally never say never to any food. I always tell patients that moderation is the key. If you eliminate something from your diet, that's a long time to go without something you really like. So I will never tell you to eliminate something, but to use it in moderation. And if you're not quite sure, just ask. Some meal tips. Your processed foods, your hot dogs, your ham, there's better choices. Turkey or chicken and steak, even buffalo is good. If you go to a Mexican restaurant, I generally tell patients that the best thing to order there, because our patients like Mexican food, the fajitas are your best choice because you can dress them the way you want. Your enchiladas have beans and cheese, which are not good for people on dialysis, but your fajitas, they may be high in sodium, but you don't have to put the cheese, you don't have to put the beans on them. You can, the cooked vegetables are very, very good. So that's your better choice. Chinese is a very difficult food for dialysis patients because it is very high in sodium. I tell people if you must go out and eat Chinese, sweet and sour might be the best choice because it's not the soy-based, it's more of a sugar-based food, which may not be appropriate if you're diabetic. Black-eyed peas and beans, you can eat frozen peas or mixed vegetables, pasta with rice or brown sauce. You can use garlic and olive oil instead of the sauces. And then heavily salted or dressed greens, just use raw in a salad and put limited amounts of salad dressing on those. Fresh and homemade is always better. If you don't cook much, just try to make some recipes. We have a lot of kidney-friendly recipes available. There's a lot of cookbooks out there, so just practice, and sometimes practice makes perfect. Should you report things to your doctor? I think absolutely. If you've had a change in your health If you've been nauseated, if you've had some vomiting, if you just notice any changes in the way food tastes, if you've had a weight loss or a weight gain, these are things you should always tell your doctor, or even your dietitian, and she can relay those to your healthcare team. But that may mean that something is out of balance in your body, and the doctor may need to look into that. Your diet can change depending on what stage of kidney failure you're at. If you're a pre-dialysis patient, if you're stage 3 or 4, your protein might be limited. However, once you start dialysis or you receive a transplant, those protein needs change. Transplant, just need an average amount of protein. But with hemodialysis and peritoneal, your protein intake is greatly increased. We'll push protein, we push eggs, we push meat. Potassium, if you're CKD, your needs depend on what your lab values are. With the transplant, usually pretty average. On hemodialysis, your potassium needs, they need to be monitored because levels can get high fairly quickly. On peritoneal, potassium levels are generally pretty low, so we loosen up the potassium restriction and let you eat those foods that are higher in potassium. Same way with phosphorus. Phosphorus is a problem across the board except for transplant. And with CKD, it'll depend on your lab values. Fluid, again, CKD depends on what your fluid status is. Hemodialysis, generally fluid restriction is pretty fluid is pretty limited. Peritoneal, again, depends on where the patient is with their fluid status. So at different stages have different needs. So again, talk with your doctor and your dietitian about what those needs might be. And again, remember, everything is individualized. No one will have the same diet because that's the important part. Not everyone's the same. We have to individualize it to each patient. So ultimately, the diet is your responsibility. It's your responsibility to ask if you don't understand something. You always have a healthcare professional. You have a dietitian. You have a doctor available. Always ask if you have a question. That's the best way to learn, and it's the best way to do what's best for you. Thank you.